Welcome to this edition of World Business Commentary. My name is Belinda Boggs and my co-host is Kristen Ciccarello. Today's topic is the Federal Reserve. For a long time, the Fed has kept the federal fund rate low but began raising rates in 2022. In the first part of 2023, they've continued raising rates. Will they continue? How will this affect the economy? First, let's begin by talking about the Federal Reserve itself. Kristen, can you fill us in? Can you start by just talking about what the Federal Reserve is, what its goals are, and how it operates?
I'd be happy to. The Federal Reserve, or the Fed, is the central banking system of the United States. The purpose of the Federal Reserve is to regulate banks, manage the country's money supply, and implement monetary policy. Congress has given the Fed two co-equal goals for monetary policy. First, maximum employment, and, second, stable prices, meaning low, stable inflation. They control this primarily by setting the federal funds rate. They increase the rate when inflation is high, and they decrease the rate when unemployment is high and the economy is in recession. What does raising and lowering the interest rate do? The Fed controls the supply of money in the economy with the rate of interest it charges banks, plus some other tools such as quantitative easing and tightening. By increasing the rate, the Fed is making money more expensive. When money is more expensive, demand for goods and services drops. Demand for labor drops. The economy cools down.
Great summary thus far. Now, why would the Fed want demand for goods and services to drop? Why would they want to cool the economy?
This is how the Fed controls inflation. The Fed has a target rate of 2% for inflation. Inflation happens when there is too much money supply. Imagine if the federal government gave everyone $1 million. Demand for goods and services would go through the roof, and that would fuel inflation, an increase in prices. Similarly, when the money supply is increased, in other words, when money is cheap, demand for money decreases and demand for goods increases. Now, demand for goods and services and even labor is outstripping supply, so we have inflation. In response, the Fed raises rates. Famous economist Milton Friedman once said, "There is one and only one basic cause of inflation: too high a rate of growth in the quantity of money. Too much money chasing the available supply of goods and services." By the way, for you out there watching on YouTube, if you like what you've heard so far, please subscribe to our channel and give us a big thumbs up.
Great. Now back to the Fed. If it's that simple and the Fed simply needs to raise rates sometimes and decrease rates other times, why is there so much debate about this? And what about the bank failures such as Silicon Valley Bank and others?
Well, it's not that simple. Right now, inflation is about 6%. This is much higher than their target rate of 2%. So, they are raising rates very quickly. But, many of the smaller banks are being hurt by these sharp increases in rates. Silicon Valley Bank failed, and Signature Bank entered liquidation under financial distress. Why? They ran out of money. Interestingly, this was a major cause of the Great Depression. The Federal Reserve tightened the money supply at the time, and the banks ran out of money. Not good.
How does that happen? How do banks run out of money?
Good question. Let's take Silicon Valley Bank. Like other banks, Silicon Valley Bank had been buying lots of quote-unquote safe assets, like U.S. Treasuries and government-backed mortgage bonds. But when interest rates start to rise quickly, as they did last year, their fixed interest payments don't keep up with rising rates. In other words, they end up paying more interest than they're earning. It's not a good situation. When their depositors found out, they withdrew lots of money. This is essentially a bank run.
Wow. Now the Fed has to be careful, right? They can't keep raising rates, could they?
They certainly could. Like I said, in the early 1930s, that's essentially what they did to cause the Great Depression. Now, I'm not saying this will cause a Great Depression. I certainly hope it won't, but they do need to be careful.
I understand rates were quite low for many years, really since the 2008 Great Recession, right? So, why is inflation showing up now?
That's another great question. I truly believe that inflation this time is not caused by too much money but a significant drop in supply of certain goods like energy. During the pandemic, supply chains were shut down. The oil and gas industry greatly reduced supply. To add to this problem, the Russia-Ukraine war began, and this also reduced supply of energy. When the supply of energy is decreased, guess what? The price increases. When the price of energy increases, the prices of everything that uses energy increases. Transportation cost is up, food cost is up, you name it. The Fed can't control the supply of goods or the supply of energy. They can affect the demand for goods, energy, and labor by doing what they're doing, but it will inflict pain on the economy. Job losses will eventually mount, the real estate market may suffer due to higher mortgage rates and a down economy, and the stock market and bond market will drop due to the increase in rates. My question is all of the pain going to be worth it? Will inflation actually come down to 2% without killing the economy?
Great questions. Do you have any thoughts on these questions? Do you think the Fed can get the rate down to 2%?
Kiplinger predicted that, quote, the slowing economy is likely to bring the yearly inflation rate down to around 4% by the end of 2023. Preston Caldwell, head of U.S. economics at Morningstar, told Times Next Advisor that, quote, we expect inflation to undershoot 2% in 2023 and 24. The consensus among economists is that there isn't a consensus. No one knows what's going to happen with inflation in the coming year. Inflation may be very stubborn, in my opinion, because it's rooted in key supply issues. The only thing that's certain with the Fed and inflation right now is that we will have uncertainty for quite a while. I believe a recession is on the horizon because we've been here before. Each time the Fed has raised rates quickly, a recession has resulted. Is it worth it? I'm not so sure, but it won't be up to me or any of you out there, unless Jerome Powell is watching.
Wow. That's great stuff. Let me see if I can summarize what we've said here today. The Federal Reserve's role is to control inflation and maintain employment. It does this primarily by setting the federal funds rate. These two roles are somewhat at odds with each other since raising rates controls inflation but results in a slowing economy, and a slowing economy isn't good for the labor market. Inflation is what we have right now, and that is generally caused when demand outstrips supply. The Fed has raised rates several times since 2022, yet inflation hasn't come down much. As for what we should expect, it's uncertain, but we should probably assume rates will stay high for a while, if we are to take Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell's recent comments seriously. That's our segment for today. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed it.